He looked at me and he said, "I'm going to give you some advice. Don't go to any parties. Don't socialize with anybody in the picture business. You may never be a star, but I am going to tell you, you'll never be without a job."
The sound advice that could have saved Patricia Douglas from lifelong torment and anguish came from director Sam Wood, and instead it saved Pauline Wagner, a stunt double for Fay Wray in the 1933 version of King Kong. In a time where there was no protocol or even a law for workplace harassment, it's not surprising to know that most women in the film industry did not get out unscathed. Casting couches, date rape, drugs, sexually transmitted diseases, and assaults were all casualties in Hollywood, but nothing to make a fuss about, right? However, on the night of May 5th, 1937, MGM Studios got the right one, that one being Patricia Douglas. Patricia did not particularly want for fame, but it was something that lingered in her surrounding environment. Her mother, Mildred Mitchell, aspired to design gowns for movie starlets, so she and Patricia moved from Missouri to sunny Los Angeles, California. While her mother fatefully became a gown designer for high-end call girls instead, Patricia found disdain for school and dropped out at the age of 14. She became platonically close to a handful of male film stars at the time, but was never reportedly romantically involved with any of them. Patricia found herself as an extra in a few movies
For something to do,
as she would say. One day, she heard of a casting call taking place at the MGM studios and decided to check it out. But little did Patsy know, this casting call was going to lead to the most horrific night of her life. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Pictures, aka MGM, was formed in 1924 by Marcus Lowe. He was the mastermind to orchestrate the merger of Metro Pictures Corporation, Goldwyn Pictures, and Louis B. Mayer Productions, hence the three-name title. For 30 consecutive years, MGM was at the pinnacle of the industry. They dominated film with over 60 big-name actors under contract, and for many audiences, their films were a means of escape, especially during the Great Depression era. MGM's rivals, Fox, Paramount, and RKO all had substantial losses that pushed them into bankruptcy or receivership. MGM, however, came up with the idea to restructure film rentals. So instead of charging exhibitors on a sliding percentage scale of box office receipts, the studio set fees on a per-film basis, calculated by first-run grosses in 30 key cities. With the combination of generating 3 blockbuster hit movies and adjusting those rental fees, MGM was able to spike a profit of $14 million in 1936. Today, that would be over $282 million. So how did they celebrate? With a party, of course. Louis B. Mayer, who sat on the throne as the boss of MGM, coordinated a 5-day sales convention to honor the sales force that conceptualized this amazing idea. 282 salesmen, distributors, and promoters were promised a super special production brought to them by the powerhouse itself. This all-out affair would cost the studio $35,000. In today's time, that's over $714,000. As you could imagine, wives, children, and plus ones were not accommodated for reasons you will soon find out. These men would be treated to a marching band festival, bottomless alcohol, a swanky luncheon, meet and greets with some of Hollywood's biggest stars, and over 100 hired women at their disposal. This is where Patricia Douglas's story begins. What's crazy is, she was reluctant to go at first, but she showed up anyway.
They never mentioned it was for a party. Ever. I wouldn't have gone.
It is assumed that Patricia is not the only one who would have felt this way. Most of the hired women answered a small classified ad that requested MGM hostesses in exchange for a hot meal and $7.50 for the day, but they did not expect to be outnumbered and ravished by over 200 men in a place where women willing to put out was expected.
It will be a state affair, out in the wild and woolly west, where men are men.
The fourth day of festivities laid way to the Wild West themed stag party hosted by producer Hal Roach. All 120 hired women, including Patricia, were outfitted in cowboy gear, leather-studded cuffs, short skirts, and boots. All the hostesses were numbered in a file kept by MGM, and Patricia was number 27. They were met with the lustful eyes of the 282 salesmen from the moment those men deboarded the studio-owned Ford sedans. It wasn't unheard of for studios to pay women to attend stag parties, but there seemed to be that unwritten insinuation that girls were expected to be more than a pretty face. In these instances, men would take advantage without suffering any consequences.
These lovely girls, and you have the finest of them, greet you, and that's to show you how we feel about you, and the kind of a good time that's ahead of you. Anything you want.
So immediately, the familiar tone had been set, and they mistook the professional working women for party favors, and anything they wanted, they got. At first, the party was tamed and polite. As Patricia danced to earn her hot meal and $7.50, she caught the eyes of a 36-year-old Catholic bachelor by the name of David Ross. He approached her in hopes of receiving a lesson. In fact, he demanded it. She exclaimed that she found him repulsive and was able to duck away to the ladies' room, buying herself some time.
The men all became intoxicated.
This account came from a waiter named Oscar Budden, who would later testify this under oath. He claimed to have heard filthy conversations come from the mouths of men in attendance, and he even witnessed the hired dancers
moving tables because the men were attempting to molest them.
Another waiter in attendance claimed the party was
the worst, the wildest, and the most rotten I had ever seen. The men's attitude was very rough. They were running their hands over the girls' bodies and tried to force liquor on the girls.
Academy Award winner Wallace Beery even had to punch a few men in order to get a young lady off the premises. It was wild. Meanwhile, Patricia was caught yet again by the gaze of David Ross, except this time, he and another attendee had her pinned, pinching her nose and forcing her to guzzle down a glass full of scotch and champagne.
Oh, I fought, but they thought it was funny. I remember a lot of laughter.
When Patricia got away, she didn't get far enough, because when she made it outside, David Ross clamped her mouth from behind with his hand, whispering a threat to dissuade Patricia from making a sound. He dragged her to a parked car and pinned her to the back seat. Clement Soth, the parking attendant, heard Patricia scream before he saw her staggering toward him, and David Ross made a run for it when Clement approached. Patricia was taken to the Culver City Community Hospital across the way from MGM.
I was given a cold water douche. Then the doctor examined me. It's no surprise he didn't find anything. The douche had removed all evidence.
MGM was the largest employer of LA County at the time. They had their own dentist, chiropractor, foundry, and of course, paid doctors. She was rushed to see Dr. Edward Linkeast, who co-owned the hospital. Due to its location, naturally, a bulk of his patients came from MGM. Linkeast was described as the family doctor. With the mishandled examination, The doctor claimed he believed there to be no intercourse, even though he could not prove it. It was a purposeful blunder because the doctor didn't want to lose MGM's business. MGM was compared to the likes of its own government. To go against them would be career suicide, not making any excuses for Link East, but MGM was not the corporation most people would willingly defy back then. But Patricia was cut from a different cloth entirely. Let's not forget, she was not impressed with Hollywood. She was uninterested in the significance of going against a machine like MGM. She just wanted someone to believe her, which is why Patricia took this all the way to federal court.
I didn't care. I just wanted to be vindicated. To hear someone say, "You can't do that to a woman."
It was unheard of for anyone to link sexual foul play to a Hollywood film studio, and in many ways, Patricia was a pioneer for the Me Too movement. She sought out the help of District Attorney Burren Fitts, who was known for winning the convictions of some seriously notorious people back then. It is said that Burren was in the pocket of the MGM producers. He and Louis B. Mayer were close friends, and unfortunately for Patricia, MGM was a top contributor to Burren's campaign. I imagine she wasn't privy to this information beforehand. Even though her celebrity friends all abandoned her, Patricia still had some connections left. After weeks without hearing from Fitz, she was able to gain contact to attorney William J. F. Brown through a mob-connected acquaintance. William was said to have been the Johnny Cochran of his day, and that's huge. If you don't know who Johnny Cochran is, he got O.J. Simpson acquitted of his ex-wife's murder. For you Gen Zers, he worked alongside Robert Kardashian Sr. Yes, Kim Kardashian's father. And I can't believe I just connected this profound story to the Kardashians. Let's move on. William took on Patricia's case, and his first chess move was the threat of a newspaper publication if the incident wasn't investigated by the DA office. Burren Fitts brushed it off as a bluff, and ultimately he made the mistake of a lifetime. But had he not, we may not have known this ever happened. This story was burned and buried with no mention of it until writer and filmmaker David Stinn dug it up. He's the reason why I'm able to bring the story to you guys today. This is a part of MGM's history that they never wanted to relive, and quite frankly, the reason they don't have sales convention parties anymore. This story was so explosive that it got pushed ahead of the Duke of Windsor's royal wedding and even Jean Harlow's terminal illness. Patricia's allegations alone catalytically changed MGM's squeaky clean image and Louis B. Mayer's moral sanctity. So, the studio shot back and began a smear campaign on Patricia. They interviewed girls that were in attendance and coerced them into saying that the party was in good fun and that Patricia was basically a whore that drank all night, amongst other false rumors they spread like wildfire.
Anyone who knew me knew I didn't drink. And since when is getting raped good, clean fun?
Pinkerton Detective Agency was assigned to shadow Patricia to dig up some dirt on her. When they came back with the honest truth, it was discovered that Patricia was a virgin and not the whore the studios tried to paint her to be. They grew desperate and even attempted to falsify that Patricia contracted gonorrhea based on a previously treated cyst that she had. But thankfully, urologist Dr. Wirt Dakin had enough integrity to not follow the studio's wishes. The first court convening took place on June 16, 1937, where the accused, the guilty, and the victimized all met once again. It was a show. Remember that girl that the Academy Award winner Wallace Beery helped get out of the party? Well, he denied that ever happened. And her name was Ginger Wyatt. She and another young lady named Paula Bromley both testified on Patricia's behalf. They were the only two girls of all 120. And I want to make sure that I name the people who did have enough courage to stand up for what was right, especially in the times where a single corporation could smear their entire livelihoods. The next day, it was an even bigger show. Remember that parking lot attendant, Clement Soth, who found Patricia after she was taken advantage of by David Ross? Well, now he recanted and said that the man that ran off wasn't David Ross. Decades later, David Stinn contacted Clement's daughters, and they confirmed that he lied under oath because MGM offered him any job he wanted. He remained a driver there for the rest of his life. Trippy, huh? The guilt must have haunted Clement so much that he revealed this story to his own children. But it wasn't over yet. Under her mother's guardianship, Patricia filed suit against David Ross, MGM general manager Eddie Mannix, producer Hal Roach, casting assistant Vincent Conniff, and John Doe 1-50 for their unlawful conspiracy to defile, debauch, and seduce her and other dancers for the immoral and sensual gratification of male guests. She sought out $500,000 in damages. That's $10 million in today's currency. More headlines were published, adding more gasoline to the fire. The studio made it a point to reward everyone who lied for them. They promised them all jobs, wanting to keep these people in good humor. You could only imagine for how many people and how long they had to keep up the deed to avoid blackmailing. Unfortunately for MGM, their insurer informed them that they'd be liable for all damages if Patricia was awarded a victory in the case. So, this influenced MGM to stall the proceedings. On February 9, 1938, the case was dismissed, but Patricia still wasn't done. She filed an identical suit in the U.S. District Court. This was the first time a female plaintiff ever made a federal case based on the violation of her civil rights. But sadly, 3 times was not the charm because her attorney, William J.F. Brown, fumbled the case on purpose. He was determined to win a political race against Burren Fitts in the upcoming election and knew that this existing litigation with MGM would hurt his chances in winning. So he failed to appear in court 3 times consecutively, and the judge dismissed the case for want of prosecution. And that basically means the case was abandoned, so for that reason it was closed. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Patricia's own mother, who was still her legal guardian, ignored the chance to expose what William did in order to get another attorney to take the case. It was implied that Patricia and her mother Mildred didn't have the best of relationships. Patricia recalled not even receiving words of comfort from her mother after being assaulted. So it begs the question, was the lawyer and Mildred paid off? I would go as far as to say Mildred was upset with Patricia for coming forth with the case because it affected her business. She designed dresses for call girls who worked in Hollywood, and I'm sure she never lost hope in trying to design dresses for the stars. Mildred was the reason they moved to LA in the first place. So she may have seen Patricia as someone who ruined her dream. And yes, that is the definition of a bad mom.
I never sued about money. That's not me. And it wasn't for glory. It was just to make them stop having those parties.
But if it helps, remember this: karma always breaks and enters during the night. William J.F. Brown lost to Fitts in the 1940 primary election, and Patricia's wretched mother married an alcoholic gambler that blew all of her life savings and left her cold and dried out. MGM was able to successfully expunge the record of the entire Wild West-themed party from hell. Eddie Mannix was asked whatever became of Patricia Douglas, that girlie who took on MGM.
We had her killed.
Thankfully, not literally, but it was disturbingly and perfectly metaphorical.
It ruined my life. Absolutely ruined my life. They put me through such misery. It took away all my confidence.
Years later, her children and family hadn't even known about this treacherous moment of her life until this article was published. May 5th, 1937 was the menacing curse that put Patricia on a different trajectory in life. For much of Patricia's life, she felt insignificant and treated herself as so. She deliberately demeaned herself, turning into the girl the MGM studios wanted her to be over 8 decades ago. Patricia married 3 times in 5 years, twice to bigamists. She labeled herself naive, stupid, a
lousy
lousy mother,
a walking zombie who glided through life.
In one of their many conversations, David Sten was able to present Patricia with the formal apologies of the hired dancing girls who lied about her in those interviews. Clement Soth's children even apologized on his behalf, seemingly patching up a wound deep down in Patricia's heart. Settled in Bakersfield, California, when David found Patricia, she confessed something to him.
Before you found me, I was getting ready to die. I'd buy less food. I wasn't planning to be around long. Now I don't want to go. Now I have something to live for. And for the first time, I'm proud of myself.
Douglas agreed to let her story go public again because she realized it would be her last chance. I personally am so happy she decided against keeping it to herself. As hurtful as it must have been, her efforts paved way for sexual injustices done to women and men today. Even though this story only regained traction in 2007, it doesn't mean there was no impact. MGM never held another sales convention like that ever again, did they? And I'm sure film companies took special care in cast calling women for parties from then on. And even though there are still predators that use their statuses and prestigious titles to get what they want, Girl Number 27's testimony slowed the momentum on an MGM-sized scale. This video was only made possible because of David Sten's article about Girl 27, Patricia Douglas, published on VanityFair.com. It was such an amazing, insightful, and entertaining read that I highly recommend you all check it out. I am glad to say that while I gave you the meat of the story, there are a lot of details that I did not mention, so definitely see what those details are and read the article. There is a documentary about it as well, and David Sten is the genius behind it. He definitely has more info that wasn't in the article, so it will be interesting to see how many more dots we can connect. Thank you all for tuning into this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think about this entire situation.